From the ranks of corruption, 3 heroes emerge, fighting for a single cause: the destruction of the masters they once served. Their names will become a thing of legend.
Wizard Doom has officially been revived, alongside Wizard Doom's big brother, Confusing Wizard Doom. They haven't included Confusing Wizard Doom 2, but there's probably only so much backtracking you can force playtesters to do before it becomes a human rights violation. So Heretic and Hexen have got a surprise facelift, 4K support, 120 FPS, gameplay enhancements, accessibility settings, a remixed soundtrack, console support, a new expansion even for both games, built-in mods, the works. And if you had the originals in your Steam library, it's completely free. Plus, it includes the DOS versions if you prefer authentic. Now, if you're not familiar, Heretic is essentially a fantasy Doom WOD. It's changed in almost every way: different enemies, weapons, an inventory system. I have a lot of nostalgia for it, though it's hard to deny it had a range of balance problems. In particular, its weapons were lackluster. Hexen, on the other hand, was a different experience. You got 3 classes, each with only a handful of weapons, and only one of them a wizard, and instead of chapters you had hub levels that you had to complete by bouncing between various portals, pulling lots of switches, then back to the hub and through to the next one. It strays further away from the Doom formula in the Heretic, which isn't a bad thing, but it is infamously obtuse. It requires you to backtrack over and over, and there's some really obscure solutions. Not obscure as in puzzling, as in brain melting, the Riddler. Just like, find a tiny button in a dusty corner 3 maps ago, obscure. Introductions out of the way. Now to examine the real questions. What have they actually changed? How much improvement, if any, is there over the originals? And most importantly, if you weren't lucky or old enough to get it for free, is the $15 price tag at all justifiable for games in their early 30s? Well, if you're interested in playing them on console or even Steam Deck, then you don't have any alternative really. Getting games with functioning mod support cleanly ported to console is actually a pretty good deal. I'm not saying having no other options available now or previously suddenly makes it criticism proof, but it's a completely different ballgame to PC. But back to the remaster itself. Accessibility, that's a big one. High contrast options, projectile transparency, flash reduction, a modern typeface option, no colorblind options. I don't really know what impact that has because I'm not colorblind. I've got the visible light range of one of those deep sea shrimps. A lot of these accessibility settings are just general improvements to the visuals. Now, the modern typeface looks appalling, but if you're dyslexic or just like legible text, then it's a hell of a lot better than the original 144p cave drawings. There's multiplayer chat options too, but I don't really care. That's not essential to anyone. I've heard good things about the multiplayer, the co-op in particular, but I'm not interested in it, so I'm not going to cover it. Crosshair options, field of view, a Bethesda link in the options for no fucking reason. 4K support, but I don't care, because I don't have a 4K monitor, because I'm playing games like this. A vault full of concept art, sprites, textures, that's actually really interesting, and not available before anywhere, I don't think, but it's a little limited. And 1 week from release, there were 3 pages of mods just for Heretic. That's pretty good. I'm sure it will expand well into the future. Give it a few weeks and there'll be over 10 pages, easily, given how many mods already exist for these games. Now, gameplay is where things get a bit more interesting than the standard spit and polish of remasters. Heretic has a weapon overhaul. It makes a lot of the weapons more powerful in an effort to reduce the slow Sponge Wars game that Heretic originally devolved into, and amping it up to be more in line with Doom. Now, this could piss off nostalgia nerds, nostalgia critics, if you will, enough already. But then you also have the item rebalancing, the level enhancements with improved flow, tweaks to enemy behavior. Notice they don't call it AI anymore, stupid. Now when it comes to Hexen, the same options are available, level enhancements being the big one. Waypoint markers, less obscure puzzles. I know the correct way to be old school is to praise convoluted navigation, and if you even consider having a quest marker, you're going to be thrown into a volcano by a pack of 47-year-old nerds, but fuck me, Hexen had some particularly stupid puzzles. And enemies. The blurb specifically calls out centaurs, branding them as tedious. That is the primary goal of these changes, reducing tedium. The backtracking and confusing chunks of Hexen don't just hold it back for modern audiences, they've held it back for 30 years. You can always turn it off if you don't want that. It hasn't compromised the design in any way. Now the soundtrack is well done. If you prefer the retro feel of the original, you can change it back. And as for the expansions, there's a 9-level Heretic expansion with new enemies. That's pretty reasonable, though I haven't properly played it, so I'm not in a position to judge. Same for the Hexen one. I've gone even less into it because I've had enough Hexen for now. But even having these options available pleases me. So, what about downsides? Well, for a start, it's $15 for two 30-year-old games with some bells and whistles. That's the big one. You could already quote-unquote fix some of the flaws in Heretic and Hexen through the use of mods. And while the WAD files are still included with this release, the original Steam listings are gone, making this the only way to purchase and own these games directly through Steam. The blow is softened by the new chapters included, but I still wish they'd kept the original games listed so people could choose not to pay for new chapters and publisher-stamped enhancements, and just load whatever mods they wanted themselves for a much lower cost. Of course, this argument falls flat if you look at a PS5 or even a Steam Deck. The reason I mentioned the Steam Deck is because I actually tried the original Heretic on one not that long ago, and it wouldn't take any input, and I couldn't get it to take any input. That could easily be a me error. But regardless of that, this is now your only option. And that's the primary issue. It's the only option. If you already owned Heretic and Hexen, this is fantastic. If not, it's a hard sell. They're great games. I'd go as far as to say this is the ideal way to play them now. And I'm sure the remastering took a lot of work. But in my opinion, the better tact would have been to make the originals free, and then release the remastered edition for fans who wanted the enhanced experience and new chapters that you've worked on. That would please most everyone, and not erode access to a game which you could argue is borderline public domain. Of course, this is a moot point for anyone who owns a large wooden sailing ship, or in this case, quite a small wooden fishing boat.